different things.
Yep.
That'll bring us to a battle of some old guys, which actually turned out to be a fairly exciting fight. We had Andre Berto against Victor Ortiz. Berto knocks him out in the fourth round after getting off the canvas after the first round. What was your take?
Well, I thought Ortiz did pretty well in the beginning. He moved. He utilized lateral movement. He looked sharp. He didn't have a lot of ring rust, surprisingly. But he knocked Berto down with a left hand. That wasn't a big power shot. He didn't have a lot of leverage behind it. So I thought Ortiz was on his way to win the fight. And he just has a mental lapse, which isn't surprising for him. And Berto catches him with a massive uppercut and puts his lights out. I thought it was a solid performance by both men. Unfortunately, I think Berto gets a title shot because of this, probably the likes of Danny Garcia or so. But solid performance. I would just prefer not to see Berto in title contention. The class is so loaded that I think there are more worthy contenders. But yeah, however it works, I guess.
Well, he's got the connections. So that, and also, let's face it, Danny Garcia, I don't think is looking for anything tough right now. I think he's hoping that a Floyd Mayweather fight pops up, and you don't want to risk that.
Yeah, well, with all the rumors circulating about Mayweather coming back, I guess if he gets that fight, I would take a softer touch in Berto as well.
Yeah. All right, that brings us to a fight that I think was more competitive than what we thought it would be, which would be James DeGale's unanimous decision or Rogelio Medina. Very good fight. Medina's a tough guy.
Yeah, and he's performed pretty well as of late. He was going in, I think, with 6 losses, and he showed he had big punching power. He smashed J. Leon Love, Mayweather promotions prospect. He demolished the guy. And I thought he looked solid, but he's too upright. He's got the defense of a punching bag. But DeGale, I thought, was just trying to please the crowd too much. He didn't move as much. He would drop his hands, try to slip punches along the ropes. I thought DeGale could have won easier if he utilized lateral movement. But Medina fought him closely all the way through, and I was surprised by the scorecards. I know people I trust who had Medina winning. I had DeGale by 2 rounds, but yeah, Medina fought well. I was surprised, and hopefully he'll get a shot. I would love to see him in with like a guy like Fonfar or something. I know it's one weight class above, though I don't really put too much stock in 168 as it is.
Yeah, you can put that one in a phone booth.
Oh yeah, I would love to see him, against a guy like Fonfar or maybe Chavez Jr.
Oh, I think he could beat Chavez Jr., but that's a whole other story and a whole other show on Chavez Jr. That brings us to Luciano Bute and Bute Jack. Now, I told you this story at the start. When I started to do this show, I'm reviewing all the fights just to make sure I remembered everything right. Now, the Bute and Jack fight I didn't get to see live. I come home, I watch it on my DVR. It cuts off at the end of the fight. And I think, well, Jack won that fight by at least 5 points. I don't have to worry about looking that up or anything. And then tonight I find out right before the show by doing some research on the fights that we're previewing next week that the fight ended up in a draw. Did you have the same take I did, that Jack pretty much won the fight pretty easily?
Yeah, I thought Jack won clearly. I don't know if the judges were thinking to themselves like, oh, Bute he's doing better than expected, so they were giving him some close ones. I thought Bute looked good. Well, for his age, a lot of people thought he was shot after Frotch, and he looks old to me. He doesn't put the leverage behind the shots he used to. But I thought Jack won clearly. He was utilizing his jab, nice movement. He covered up well. Didn't really take a lot of clean shots on the face. I thought Jack won by, I think I gave Bute 3 rounds maybe. I can't remember my scores now, but it was a clear win for Jack, and I think most of us were shocked. I'd be surprised if Bute wasn't shocked by the scores.
Yeah, I think I had it like 8-4, 9-3, something like that, and I never once even worry. Usually if that happens, I'll check just in case because you know how boxing is. But
yep.
So what do you think? I think they're talking about Bute Jack fighting James DeGale. What do you think happens there?
Well, I'm happy for it because they're potentially the number 1 and number 2 guys. I can't say for sure. Somebody may have Ramirez number 2 because he did beat Arthur Abraham, who was highly ranked. But for me, DeGale and Jack are the 2 best in the division. For me, this will establish who is number 1. So I like the fight. I think we should have more fights like this where we need Lanier or Lanier champions. So, this should be happening all the time. Sadly, it doesn't. But I like the fight. I think that James DeGale will win. Jack he's a good fighter, but he doesn't really do much for me, like stylistically. He's a good fighter. Again, he does, he jabs well. He moves pretty well. He can hit okay, even though surprisingly he didn't hurt Bute not once. But I think DeGale has another level. What he did against Medina, I think he can improve upon that performance. And I think Jack showed that he can be susceptible to a southpaw style, and I think DeGale utilizes that and probably pulls off a decision if they ever do fight, which I'm hoping they do.
Yeah, I hope they do. The way they made it sound, it was a done deal. They're fighting on Showtime, so we'll see. But it's boxing, so just like the decisions, you never know what you're going to get. All right, so any final words?
No, actually I do. I have an announcement for you. I didn't tell you at the beginning of the broadcast, but on last week's show, I had informed you that an Australian prospect named Jeff Horn had, I'd read an article about him. His father had gotten a hold of me, and you recommended that I send him a message, see if we get him on the show, and I did, and he agreed. All
right, so we're going to do that next week, or?
Yep.
Okay. What's the time difference there?
Well, actually, he messaged me and said he'll be in
here.
He's going to be in New York City for 6 weeks. So if we don't, if for some reason we can't get him next week, we've got 6 weeks to cover before he leaves back to Brisbane.
All right. Does he have any fights coming up, or just over here training?
No, I think he's just sightseeing at the moment. I haven't messaged him back because I've been a little busy today. But yeah, I think he's just sightseeing at the moment. Again, he just beat Randall Bailey not long ago. So I'm not exactly sure what he's doing here, but we've got him for 6 weeks. Got that time.
All right. Well, we'll definitely have him on. Maybe we'll have Kermit in talking about his win, and we'll have Jeff Horn on to talk about his career a little bit. Or maybe we could just do a separate show with Jeff.
Yeah, either way.
But all right, sounds good then, Jeremiah. And I got your name right again for the 3rd week in a row, I believe, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've gotten so much confidence in you now that I don't even second guess it.
I'm rolling now. So.
Yeah, you're rolling.
All right, so next week we'll review all the fights we previewed, and we will preview fights we're going to review the week after. Does that make any sense?
Hey, I'm with you. I'm following.
And once again, we want to wish good luck to Kermit Cintron on his comeback fight tomorrow night. Hopefully we'll have Kermit on next week after his big win, hopefully. So make sure you check out The Grueling Truth at Grueling Truth on Twitter. Check us out on Google Music, iTunes, Spreaker, Stitcher, just about anywhere you get a podcast out. Make sure you check out our website, gruelingtruth.net, for all your boxing, football, baseball news. So make sure you check all those out, check all the old shows out, all the old articles. So, Jeremiah, one real quick question. I was thinking about an article on the top 10 British boxers of all time. What do you think?
All right. So, in my opinion, I count, even though he didn't live there for his entire career, he immigrated to New Zealand, I count Bob Fitzsimmons.
I count him, too, because he was still from there, correct?
Yeah, he lived there until I believe he was 5 or 6. And then he moved to New Zealand, which is home to a ton of Brits anyways. So I count Bob Fitzsimmons the first 3 division champion in history. I count him as the number 1 British fighter ever. Number 2, maybe like Ted Kid Lewis.
What about Jimmy Wild?
Jimmy Wild would be number 2 for sure. Sorry, I
would have had Wild at number 1. I haven't done the final list yet, but
yeah. The problem, however, with Jimmy Wild is I love Jimmy Wild. He was a massive hitter for his size. The guy barely weighed 100 pounds at times. It's just the names on Bob Fitzsimmons on his resume are a little more recognizable.
Yeah, but they're going to be because he fought at middleweight, light heavyweight, and heavyweight. Wild was a little dude.
True. That is true. And
and what about Lennox Lewis?
Yeah, I'd probably have Lewis. I'd have Lewis behind Ted Kid Lewis, but I think Lewis is probably. I'd have to look a little more into this, and get a definitive answer. But I'd say he's probably 5, 6, 7, somewhere around there.
And then the big question is Prince Nassim Hamed.
I probably have.
Before Barrera whipped his ass, and Barrera's one of the great featherweights of all time. I mean, Hamed did beat some really good fighters.
Yeah, I mean, he had a nice. I think I really started. He's one of the few people who got me into boxing, because he was so flamboyant and flashy, and he obviously had tools. I wish he would have continued his career because I think he had more to give the boxing world.
Yeah, I think that his heart was taken by Barrera.
Yep, I agree.
I think that he built himself up so big in his mind, even he didn't think he could lose, and when it happened, I don't think he knew how to deal with it.
Yeah, well, another thing I hold against Hamed, again, he was, he's such a showman and had massive power and a creative style. The thing I hold against him, too, is Juan Manuel Marquez was his WBO mandatory for years, and he just ignored it. They just let him put it off. So, I'd probably have Hamed. I don't know. I'd have to think a little bit more about it.
I don't know. I think he's borderline. I think he's between like 10 and 15. Yeah.
I'm sure some people would, talk about Randy Turpin and Benny Lynch, the great, little guy. Yeah, I'd have to look into that a little bit more and get some definitive answers. But
me too, so I can write the article.
Yeah. Yeah, you got some homework to do.
What did you think about my top 10 pound for pound last week?
I thought it was pretty good. I would only disagree in spots. I personally wouldn't have Andre Ward up there, and I know a lot of people may find that.
Yeah, but hey, sometimes we agree to disagree. But all right, guys, make sure you check out the Grueling Truth's top 10 boxers pound for pound list also. So we're going to go ahead and get out of here now. I think Jeremiah's phone dropped, but make sure you check us out next week on Inside Boxing Weekly. So for Jeremiah Preisser, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.